And now I'm going to introduce our presenters for this evening. First, we will have Kim Daly. Kim has been a lighting designer for Hartranft Lighting Design for 7 years. She's also been on the NYC W.I.L.D committee for about the same amount of time, rising to the committee leader position about a year ago. Kim scoured the internet looking for relevant research and studies to provide a general understanding of the inequities to health and lighting people face. Allison Thayer is an associate researcher at the Mount Sinai Light and Health Research Center, the LHRC. She is part of the Light and Health team who implements LHRC lab research into field studies and design applications. A fundamental ongoing project has been the development of educational material for circadian effective lighting designs. Allison is also a part of the social media outreach team. And then finally, our discussion will be led by Melanie Freundlich. She is the founding principal of Melanie Freundlich Lighting Design, which she established in 1997 and is a WBE certified designer in New York State and New York City. Melanie is a member of the founding committee of W.I.L.D and has been active in pursuing equality and promoting advocacy for women in the industry for over 30 years. As I said, she'll be leading the general discussion. And now I'm going to turn things over to Kim.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to start by talking about some research that I did in terms of both health and light inequities. And then, like she said, we're going to go on to the survey results. And finally, the open discussion. So starting with some health, just a little bit of an introduction in case you aren't familiar. W.I.L.D stands for Women in Lighting Design, and the LHRC is the Light and Health Research Center. We combined forces over the summer to send out a survey, which some of you filled out, polling the lighting industry as far as how they felt, what parts of our industry might not be equitable when it comes to lighting and to health. And as lighting professionals, is there something that we could do to lessen this inequity? So that being said, first thing I want to do is talk about the difference between equity and equality, because we use the term interchangeably, and there is a difference between the two. So the easiest way for me to think of it is equality means that everybody has access to the same thing. So for example, we all have access to heart medicine. We might not all need heart medicine, but we all have access to it. Equity would be that we all have access to the medicine that we need, whether it's heart medicine, asthma medicine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just to be clear, the difference between those two. Moving on, some examples of health inequity according to the World Health Organization. You can read here. Equity is the absence of avoidable unfair differences among different groups of people. So we are going to talk about how we have seen inequity in both health and also in starting with health. I'm going to talk about an example that actually started back in the 1930s. This was right after the Depression, and the United States government was trying to make it easier for families to get mortgages for homes. And what they did was they took a look at the maps and they said, okay, which areas do we feel are safe bets? Which people are going to pay us back the mortgage? Which people might default? Based on that, they turned these areas into red line areas, or areas where they would not promote mortgages. That being said, people were already discriminated against based on their color. Many Negro neighborhoods were in the red line areas. Fast forward to today, and these red line areas today, specifically in Boston and New York City, there have been studies that show that people still in these areas have more health issues and don't have access to health care like the areas that are not in red. So even though this started in the 1930s, it is still prevalent today in today's society. And then one final thing before I change slides, I thought it was interesting that white men reached life expectancy of 65 in 1940s, whereas Black men didn't reach age of 65 life expectancy until the 1990s. So we definitely still have a little ways to go when it comes to equity. Next slide. Up until about 25 years ago, most research was conducted, health research was conducted on men. So any kind of medication dosages, any kind of symptoms, all that stuff was based off of men, and mostly white men. So if you were a woman or if you were a person of color, you know, up until recently, you would be given dosages of medicine or you would be given terms of care, maybe not in your best interest because it wasn't specific to you. Moving on to the next slide, bringing this a little bit closer to home or more present day is COVID-19. So COVID-19 killed Native Americans at nearly 3 times the rate of whites. And the reason this is because in general, making a generality here, a lot of the Native Americans, they're living on the reservations. They might not have access to clean water and electricity. So they're already at a disadvantage from a home standpoint. That makes their health compromised, which means that they could have more risk of severe COVID, leading to the increased risk of that. So again, there's a lot that we can do to try to improve health for everybody and make it more equitable for everybody and equal for everybody. So moving on to the next slide. I think many of us have probably heard this research before, but I find it interesting. And this kind of ties in a little bit to moving on to a little bit more of the light end of health. Night nurses. There was a study that was done between day nurses and night nurses to see if they had a greater chance of getting cancer. And there was a 32% greater risk of breast cancer for night nurses than there was for day nurses. And we all know in the lighting profession that, you know, your body needs to have times of darkness so that it can heal and rejuvenate the cells. I always told my children growing up, summer is for eating, sleeping, and growing. Your body needs that sleep. It needs that dark time so that it can grow and heal. And if you are under light at nighttime, your body does not get that opportunity to heal. So continuing on with lighting, next slide. One more, please. The light pollution is also prevalent depending on where you live in the United States. So communities of color and or low socioeconomic status were exposed to light pollution 2 times more often than white Americans. And you can see by just looking at this map, how we have light pollution in urban areas and, you know, definitely not as much in the rural areas. Next slide. For those of us who live in New York, bringing this a little bit closer to home, back in 2014, when the quote unquote stop and frisk ended, New York City police decided to invoke what they're calling the omnipresence. And what they did was they actually brought in temporary floodlights, which by the way, they're still there 8 years later, into areas where there was public housing and poorer neighborhoods. These portable generators are loud, they're costly, they emit fumes. The residents complain about that they're glary and that they're poor sleep. This doesn't happen in other areas of New York City or in New York, but again, they figured higher light levels would equate to lower crime, which in fact it did reduce nighttime crime, but at the expense of people's quality of sleep at nighttime. Next slide, please. Speaking of sleeping, this study used 10-foot candles of artificial light at nighttime to see how people's bodies reacted to the light. And although, which I thought this was kind of interesting, they said that the light level was not bright enough to suppress melatonin, so your body was still producing melatonin, your body under these 10-foot candles of artificial light had elevated heart rates, the nervous system was in alert state. They had increased insulin resistance. And so even though it wasn't enough to stop melatonin, it was still enough light that the body was not able to rest. So we need that dark night light in order for our bodies to rejuvenate and to rest and repair our cells. And then we've been talking a lot about night and how we don't want light at night, but I think another important element to think about as well is daylight and daytime light. The lighting, the LHRC published an article that talked about how light during the day, and this was specifically on people with dementia, can improve your sleep and your mood and your behavior, your sleep at night, your mood and your behavior. So by making sure that there's enough light during the day and making sure that in terms of your circadian rhythm, that it's the right type of light during the day, people slept better at night, it reduced depression and agitation, and the longer that this went on, the effects were cumulative over time. So again, it's important to get the rest light levels, but it's also important to make sure that we have the proper daytime light levels as well. Next slide, please. So in summary, it's just, since day one, unfortunately, there's been certain people in the US that have been discouraged from having proper light levels, proper health, access to health, and things that happened back in the 1930s or earlier are still a factor even today. So we wanted to have a conversation with the lighting industry to see, what can we do to try to remedy this? And then before I turn this over to Allison, just one more slide. All those research things that I showed you at the bottom, it showed where it quoted where I got the information from. But if you're looking for additional resources, here's a couple of these. We will make sure that these slides are available. And like we said, we're videoing this as well. But you could go to lightjustice.org, which we're going to talk about later today, or any of these other places to get more information if you're interested in finding out about the past and even current present as far as how we can make how light and health have not been as equitable or equal as it could be. So that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Allison, who is going to actually talk about the survey results. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was a great background. Gives us a great understanding kind of where we are in terms of the history of it. So as we mentioned, at this point, we'll go over the survey that maybe many of you were participating in back in the summer. We really appreciate that. I knew it was a lengthy survey, so we appreciate the people who did take the time to do that. And with this, we're really looking, like we were saying, of how people in the industry are viewing where we are in terms of this light and health equity side of it. So that's what this survey is trying to go through, is where do we view ourselves in that? So some of the background is that we did receive 87 responses for this. The majority of it, people who responded, were lighting designers, mostly because that's who we, the audience that we sent it to. But we had some manufacturers and lighting reps as well, and then some other fields within lighting as well. And within that, we asked, what projects do you mostly work on, to kind of get a sense of what types of projects in terms of higher, lower budgets. So a lot of them were this higher end commercial, academic and education. We didn't actually distinguish between private or public education. So that would be something interesting to look at if projects are more on the private educational side. Also, large corporations and high-end residential were the top 4 there. And then affordable housing, you can see not many people, about 13, work on these types of projects. We also asked, so what does this good quality lighting mean to you? So as we're going through this survey, what does this actually mean to you? So almost everybody said that low glare was something they considered this good quality lighting. So these top choices are the ones that we had people be able to select from, and you could select as many as you wanted. And then some people also filled in some of these at the bottom. So that's why they're a lot less, but it's ones that people filled in. So user control was also higher up on the list. And something interesting, at least for me, was that health benefit capabilities was pretty low on the list. Only 31 of those 87 people were viewing health benefit capabilities as something that would be considered good quality lighting. And being somebody who works on that every day, I found that very interesting as to why. So I think that'd be a good point of discussion later on. So next we asked, do you believe that this good quality lighting that we defined previously, do you think it has to be, or sorry, excuse me, is it expensive? So we said, yeah, yes, sometimes, depends, and no. So the majority of people did say sometimes this good quality lighting is expensive. And then we asked, do you believe that it has to be expensive to achieve this goal? And we limited it to just being a yes or no, kind of being definitive. And almost everybody leaned towards no, it does not have to be expensive. So that's interesting to move forward with. And something, for this the survey moving forward was, do all end users, and do you think that all end users have equal access to this good quality lighting? And again, majority of people said no, that end users don't actually have access to this low glare lighting, to what we consider to be this good quality lighting. And so for the people who said yes and no, we actually had a lot of great comments. And again, we really appreciate the thought people put into this. So we were able to categorize all the different comments and kind of have some main takeaways from these. So for all the people that said yes, they do believe that all end users have good quality in lighting, it's because the technology is available. We have new LEDs that have all these capabilities to create this type of lighting. One person said, though, yes, but I just don't think that all consumers know or understand what good/quality lighting is and how to achieve it. So yes, it's available. The technology is capable of creating this, but not everybody knows how to achieve it. And that leads into the many no's that we received. So in this first category, no, because inexpensive lighting is often poor quality, because low-cost fixtures prioritize efficacy over quality, and that manufacturers flood the market with cheap, poor quality options, because people will buy them if they're cheap because they don't know. As well as affordable housing developers usually want the cheapest solution because they don't have the money in the budget to be buying expensive lighting. They have other things that they would want to buy for spaces to look nice. Another big category was no, because there is not a designated design team. One interesting thing was that an influencing factor might be location. So for example, a restaurant in a major metropolitan area is more likely to hire a lighting designer and pay for a higher quality lighting source compared to a rural area restaurant that may not have as much money in the budget to be doing that. And all have this equal access, but may not know that the lighting professionals exist. We being in the industry, of course, know that lighting designers exist, but many people may not actually realize that it's this niche field that people have a job doing. And also, a lot of projects and jobs have this one size fits all in layouts. And sometimes that's the easiest thing to do, is having that cookie cutter, plopping 2x4s into a space and calling it a design. And that's just the easiest thing to do. So you see that happen a lot. Another quote was, good quality lighting does not have to be expensive, but it does need to be thoughtfully executed by someone who is thinking about the users, their experience, and not just the building codes. So you really need somebody who's advocating for the end users and the experience that they'll be having in the space that they're going to be in a lot of the time. And also that it's not in standard lighting practice yet. Lighting is still an afterthought a lot of the time, and an expense that's not necessary in some projects, especially in these lower budget projects, which brings me to the next section that no, because because expense is not allotted in the funding or the budget. That decision makers, such as the government agencies or owners, often prioritize the quantity and price of lighting over the quality, again, because they don't necessarily know what it means to have this good lighting. And that thoughtful, well-designed lighting is not generally available to marginalized communities or lower income customers. Pricing of high quality fixtures prevents lower income people from being able to buy it. And an interesting point that affordable renter friendly retrofits especially are not really something that this person commenting has seen. And it's a good point because a lot of people who may be in lower economic status may be renting a lot, which means you can't be drilling into the ceilings or having putting all these lights in your space. So you're really limited into what you're able to have, which can be screw-in bulbs and things like that. And then another good point too is that many lower end projects are value engineered to the bare minimum code requirements, and that could be in any project too. It's sometimes most of the time projects get out of hand with the budget, and then they have to be value engineered to be cutting out parts of the project. And again, people might choose to have some marble in the space rather than having good lighting. So that tends to be where lighting gets cut out as well. And I think the biggest factor in this is due to lack of education in terms of the consumer, the owner, customer, even architects and engineers, that they don't necessarily understand the importance of this good quality lighting. And even if materials are affordable, that the expertise to ensure that it makes it on the job properly and effectively located and installed is nearly exclusive to higher end projects. So that was something somebody commented as well. And that contractors and or sales personnel at the DIY, so these hardware stores, have the limited knowledge about quality lighting. They're installed in the hardware stores, and mostly people know about color temperature and not too much else other than that it looks pretty. But how to actually apply it into the space and make it be effective in terms of this good quality. That people don't always know what is available other than what's in their stores, and that it's not on the high priority list for most buyers. That was another good point. And a couple more on this too. If both people, if you're offering kind of this good and bad quality of lighting, and the better quality is more expensive, there's nothing stopping a consumer from getting the worst lighting because they just don't know any better. They want to save money, and if they don't see a difference in it, then they're going to go with the cheaper option. And then lastly on this, it's difficult for non-lighting people to understand what constitutes good lighting, no matter the price level or income bracket. So I now want to take a look at health equity in lighting and what we thought about that. So in general, we asked people, what does health equity in lighting mean to you? And a lot of it had to do with kind of the psychological or emotional side of lighting that it provides. A lot of people put that as the top choice. And same with security and even environmental, such as the recycling and energy use of lighting. And then again, the lower side of the graph here is the effect on circadian rhythms and even sleep. And as Kim was giving examples earlier, that lighting is really important on these this factor. So, but it's not necessarily on the top of everyone's radar. And then getting a little bit more into this light and health side that we've been talking about. So we asked people to rank the following characteristics of lighting that you think impact human health. So the blue indicates that somebody thought it was very impactful, and then yellow is not at all. So light level was pretty high on that list again, with dimming and controls under that as well. And then the lowest one was color temperature, You know, we recognize that we do say that spectrum is very important, and we put in color temperature kind of as a general, but people didn't view that as something that was impactful to human health. And another ranking one, so with one or that blue bar being the top choice, rank the following for what you think causes these inequalities in lighting and health. And the top one was this lack of lighting knowledge. So we've talked about the education side of things. So for building owners and these people who make these decisions about paying for the lighting, these inequalities are because there's a lack of knowledge or education for these individuals. Cost for providing this good lighting and switching to a better system, that was number 2 in rankings there. And interestingly, the availability of new lighting, not many people viewed that as being their top choice. I think because we recognize that the technology is available, we don't necessarily need new innovative lighting, that the technology is there, but it's more of that education of how to apply it and for people to buy into that. And then we also asked your opinion on the risk level of who is likely to experience this low quality lighting. And the low income, socially disadvantaged population was pretty much everybody agreed that they would be top on the list there. And then followed by elderly and healthcare workers. And lowest on the list was actually academic or education, with not having the highest risk. So that was interesting as well. So now we'll get into this ability for us to change. So this is where the discussion part really happens in terms of what can we do as an industry. So we allowed people to select all that they thought is something we can do. And most people chose a lot of these options, but really advocating within the industry and governmental structures was top of the list of what we should be doing to be reaching this full health potential or this good quality lighting. How do we get that to be achieved? And then, so one thing as a lighting industry that we can do, so this we were limited to just having one selection, that people mostly chose that the education of the contractors or these decision makers was their top choice. And second was the education of the public. So these end users on how to read lamp information when they're buying it for themselves, and just how it actually impacts you. So people are more willing to either spend more money or learn how to actually implement it correctly for those health impacts. And just a couple more things. Again, we in that question asked, we allowed people to do comments as well. So a couple picked out of that is to get and stay involved in the agencies that write codes and regulate building requirements for public housing, for schools and health facilities, and encourage more tax breaks for healthy, good quality lighting in construction. So if people are actually following these standard way of doing things, they should be compensated for that. And also provide funding for underrepresented communities to improve lighting with community input. So I think that was a nice suggestion as well. And then I like this question a lot too. So we asked, rating the impact of who you think has the most impact for change in this light equality. So again, the blue was the most impact for change, and yellow was low impact. And lighting designers was the top. Could be because we had a lot of lighting designers in the survey. So if we had more of a broad audience for that, maybe it would have shifted. But for this survey anyway, that's what came out on top. And same as government agencies and architects as well, we're pretty high up there too. Consumers, interestingly, only 19 people chose them as having the most impact for this change. Could be because if we're talking about bigger projects that have a lighting designer or just architects doing it, not necessarily just a home project, these consumers don't really have the ability to change their lights in their office building. So that could be possibly why that one was rated lower. But the point I really want to make is that people agreed that it's really a group effort of the above. It's not just lighting designers, it's not just architects or government agencies. It's really everybody working together and really starting this conversation on what we can be doing as not just an industry, but as a community as a whole to be creating these more equal lighting opportunities. So just some key takeaways that we gathered from this in a couple main categories. So really it's that education that these lighting technologies are available, but we're really lacking that education to know how and why to use it, to be willing to pay for it on a consumer side and a decision maker side. And also make it simple for people to understand. Lighting can get pretty complicated, so how can we explain it to people to be able to educate them on the importance of it? And then the next would be cost. So generally, higher budget projects have more access to this good quality lighting, and lower income communities are more at risk for these poor quality lighting. So somebody had mentioned providing more funding for these types of projects and specifically in the lighting side of it. And then lastly, that collaboration. So this impact for change is beyond just the lighting industry. So how do we start that conversation to, outside our industry to create this change? So thank you for, again, for completing that survey. And we'll start the discussion part now. And Melanie will take over for that. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. We're going to unspotlight ourselves so we can see all you guys. And I think that just to start off, we really got a great response to the survey. We were really excited especially to see all the extended comments on the open-ended questions. You saw some of those in Allison's slides, and they really triggered a lot of discussions between the four of us. So we really thought it would be great to give people time to expand on some of these, really provocative and interesting comments and informative comments. So, we're going to post a couple of slides with questions. I guess we'll do it one at a time. To start the discussion, but feel free to bring some of your own questions or things that you want to say. If you see the reaction menu at the bottom of your screen, if you click on that, on the raise your hand, then I'll see a hand and I will unmute you and you can say what you want to say or whatever your reaction was to the survey that you just saw. So I guess no point in, let's just go on to the first slide, which has this first question or this first talking point on it. So at the very beginning of the survey, as Allison was showing you, this question of what's good quality lighting and who gets it, and who doesn't get it and why not, really brought the most, the biggest load of answers and thoughts of the whole survey. So good quality lighting refers to both daylighting measures, light fixtures, as well as the application of lighting into our world. All of these elements join, though, to form financial costs of any lighting system in any kind of building. So 67 of the 87 survey responders believe that good quality lighting can be expensive, some of the time at least, but only 5 people in the survey say it has to be expensive. So to me, that sounds like a lot of people think it doesn't really have to be so expensive. There's a lot of reasons why it is so. So how do you guys think that cost factor can be reduced? How can we fill that gap from, yes, it's really expensive and that's why many people don't have good lighting, and the gap between that and people answering, it doesn't have to be that way. So what are your thoughts on that? I will unmute Natalia.
Hi, I'm a kitchen and bath designer, so I have I'm also a bit of a nerd and have started studying lighting and gotten into it fairly deep. Just from having projects that have fallen flat because of poor lighting based on choices from homeowners and electricians. Love electricians, but when it comes to lighting quality, their go-tos are probably one of the largest impacts of poor quality lighting. They love those glowing discs of light that when you look at the photometric report of them are falling very, very short of actually providing quality light on surfaces where it's needed. So that's a huge impact, in my opinion, as to where lighting falls short, because what's easy isn't necessarily what's best, and it's not necessarily as cost effective either. I know some of the go-tos that a lot of the electricians use are very cost effective, and I've had many conversations with my electricians, and I've kind of fought with them toe to toe, and it's like, this is why I pick. And I've had a lot of discussion with contractors as well, because they'll just defer to the electrician. So I think if we could get our electricians involved, because they're the ones installing it and they're the ones that are often guiding homeowners. So if we could educate the trade as a mass, it might be a first start.
So so you're saying that the electricians and contractors, so you're speaking mostly, I guess, of residential lighting is what
Very
your
much
experience has been. If they stuck to the specifications, perhaps more tightly, or they didn't have, if it's a budgetary reason that they're doing that because they aren't educated in why this is good or bad lighting, it's just about meeting the budget.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah.
It's definitely part of it for sure. Their go-to also happens to be fairly budget conscious as well, but they're not doing anybody any favors.
Right.
The other challenge, and the more I've got involved with selecting and specifying lighting, is the process. So I've worked with some manufacturers that are great, and I get involved, and I've attended webinars and some product knowledge seminars. They'll send samples, and then the process to actually order their product is the most convoluted and painful thing I've ever seen.
Right.
I mean, I'm a kitchen and bath designer. I'm a cabinet dealer, so I deal directly with my manufacturer. I order from my manufacturer, I
Right.
receive it. Whereas with lighting, you can talk to a manufacturer, but then it goes to another company that then sets something up with a retail. It goes.
Right. It's an age-old procedure. It's also a really, in
and I
30,
think that
30 years I've been in the business, that that process is very
terrible.
difficult to keep costs down. Yeah.
But I think that impacts costs significantly, because everybody
Yes, of course.
needs to make a profit on
Right.
what they're selling. So by the time you've gone through 3 or 4 channels and
Right.
everybody's added their percentage, if to the end consumer, it makes it almost unaffordable.
Right.
So
Um,
that's my 2 bits.
thank you, Natalia. Rebecca.
Hi, I
Hi.
come from the opposite world, more with the
Right.
commercial and institutional experience. And I go back to thinking about that it's easy to design things expensively. The expensive stuff is good quality. The expensive stuff looks good on its own. It's harder to design things inexpensively. So if we go back to the days of the fluorescent tube, if you put a tube just on the ceiling, it was low quality, it felt glary, whatever. But if you design a cove around it, it looks better and it feels better and everything like that. So in terms of thinking about how the cost factor can be reduced and by whom, I think that the cost comes into education about how to use lower cost tools in a
Right.
quality way.
Well, I think what you're referring to was also in the survey where people were saying projects, say lower budget projects, affordable housing, public schools, whatever, often can't afford a full design team. So they don't have lighting designers. It takes a lot of skill. That's why we tell people you need lighting designer. It takes a lot of skill to interpret a code, say an energy code, for a public building, and still get good lighting. So it's not as simple as just meeting the watts, right? So I think what you're saying, and so you need someone who knows how to use the technology and how to use, say, a lower cost solution and have it check all the other boxes. Be good lighting. Not only is it low cost, but it's good lighting. It's a good application, serves the user well. So yeah, I think, that comes back to the, well, you're also saving money by not having a lighting designer. So, people put that in with how to reduce costs. Well, we don't need a lighting designer. And we also don't need someone to tell us, what's good quality lighting, because we're just going to get what's cheaper. JP.
Yeah, so I think every project is going to look to reduce costs. I think that we have to start from a place of value, right? So while I appreciate the idea of how we can reduce cost factors, I think lighting designers get very creative about how to do that on projects where light is already established as a value, right? So go to Rebecca's Cove example. There's all kinds of ways to get to cove lighting, and the lighting designers that I work with have found very creative ways to get that cove lighting as inexpensive as possible per foot, right? To keep the concept on the job. The bigger question is, are the folks that are commissioning the job to begin with thinking about light as a valuable piece of the design puzzle? That to me is where we have to start, because I think,
they're also the people controlling the purse strings.
100%. And you pay for the things that you value, right? So if you've decided that this is a valuable part of the design, you'll be willing to invest more money into it. But I think lighting designers are particularly good at getting that, getting jobs in under budget. So there's more than one way to do almost anything.
Trusti.
Hi. Oh, perfect pronunciation. Thank you.
Was that good? I
Yeah,
feel
it
like
was really good. I didn't expect
I feel like I
that.
mangled at it.
I was going to correct you already. Hi. So I also work in lighting design, and I think the problem is also systemic. The projects that we work on, even the ones that have high budget, demand really fast production from lighting designers. So at a lot of for most parts, we are crunching on getting the design done. There are unrealistic expectations of when we turn around work. So this kind of reduces our intention to do good lighting sometimes, because we're just trying to meet deadlines all the time. And I have to say, I don't think thinking about equity is inherent to the way we look at design. For example, even if you take a very high budget project, that it could be this big office space or a hospital, we are still putting 2x2s in places where people are working 9 to 7. We're not at the SD stage advocating for back of house spaces to get windows. So I think we are okay. We look past a lot of these spaces because we don't always think about equity when we design. So I think first it's important for us to educate ourselves, and then internally within design meetings, think about, hey, have we tackled the question of equity in our design in this project? And then that will make us more intentional in the way.
I agree. I think that's a great point. And I think it's tied into this issue again of codes, because I think that ends up being at the top of the list, especially for something like back of house spaces, or in the workplace. Well, you just need to have this many foot candles or this many watts, or you can't have very many watts. And if there was somehow something in the code that speaks to metrics of quality lighting, then it kind of forces the design team to think about the equity in those spaces, because now they have to think also just about the overall health and usage of the end user. So
Right. Yeah.
I think you're right.
I think Living Building Challenge does a great job of thinking of the qualitative aspects of equity as well. I've worked on a couple of living building projects where consultants get in on a call like before the design phase starts, and where actually like different consultants are able to give their viewpoints in terms of equity. So we were working on a theater project, and we could actually get in an SD and tell them, hey, you know, like none of the costume set design rooms have a skylight. Like, what about that? That's equity right there. So yeah.
Interesting. Elaine.
Hi. Yeah, I also think that we don't know enough about what makes good lighting for every individual. So if it depends on how they function, just on like the neurotypical way, or if they are on the spectrum, or if they have some type of disability, or any of those things where light has been shown to make such a big impact on the way that they function and the way that they live day to day, yet no research has been done, or it's slowly coming out, but not enough research has been done where that is the focus on how do we do lighting design for the people that are are disabled or have a neurodiverse brain function. Because most of the lighting design has been developed for white neurotypical people that are fully abled. So I think it's also focusing on that, where we need to start to learn how other people see the world and how lighting can impact that and make it better for them.
Right. Agreed. Maybe we should move on to our second question. Allison, if you could go to the next. Okay. So this connects to what we were just talking about, what Elaine was just talking about partly in that last comment. So what is getting any attention in the public arena is the health effects of light levels and color temperature combined on circadian rhythms, for instance. That's, if you're reading the newspaper and you're a layperson, that's maybe what you're hearing about the most. But out of our responders, most people were saying that it was the top, response was it's light level. Light levels have the most impact on human health because it brings in other things. Light levels impact other things than just circadian rhythms. And most of the people who responded were lighting designers. So my question to you guys is, lighting designers and others, do you think that it is due to codes and various institutional design standards like the SCA or green building or LEED? Do you think because those emphasize energy use and not particularly visual comfort, is that why we're getting these inappropriate light levels? Do you think that's one of the reasons? Oh, Edward.
Hi, folks. I could speak to that in the sense that I've worked at a utility, and I think a lot of effort that's been driving a lot of the efficiency has been utility rebates and DLC and things like that. And I think the focus on efficiency is wrong-headed, and I think a lot of times people are using a rule of thumb that is incredibly dated. They have very old thumbs, and they're replacing LEDs are replacing old technology with LEDs, and they're overdriving. There's too many lumens happening in those spaces, and they don't care about CRI or color temperature, nor do they educate their customers about those things. So I think the effort the drive toward efficiency has really hurt the quality of lighting more so. And I think the recent articles, even in LA Times, looking at the replacement of streetlights and how that's overlit many neighborhoods and it's driven up light
sure.
pollution. So it's happening in their interior spaces as well.
Yeah, you know, and it's because it's mostly public projects that have to, well, either, as you say, because they're trying to save money, which they need to by doing nice, you know, complying with NYSERDA, getting kickbacks for using highly efficient light fixtures. Those projects end up with glary, overlit, poorly designed light fixtures. You know, I've worked on affordable housing projects, and it's a fight to, you know, comply with NYSERDA or DLC or whatever, and still get comfortable, healthy lighting. I think.
Yeah, and I would just add, lighting designers typically do not work on those projects. And
right.
Contractors, ESCOs work on those projects, and they're
right.
And so just to give you perspective, utilities have given out almost billions of dollars in rebates to drive our lighting industry toward efficiency and toward LEDs. It's happened over the last 12 years. And the outcome has been we've overlit a lot of these spaces.
Right. Maggie.
Hi. Yeah, in addition to that, I would just going back to kind of what Shruti said, a really successful project that I've had, I'm a lighting designer, and a really successful lighting project I had is a school that we picked from the beginning an LPD, but then you know, from the get-go, this was our goal, a really low LPD. But then as we kept that in mind, we worked really hard to do very quality light of, you know, where we could do indirect, where we could make that efficient as possible and make all these decisions with that efficiency in mind, as well as light quality. But again, and then I was able to calc each individual space and take the time and effort necessary to make sure that I was getting quality lighting, efficient lighting, and cost-effective lighting all together. And it took a lot of time to do that. And so when these project schedules are so condensed, it really makes it hard to, you know, do this fine-grained work that really produces that equity that we're looking for.
Yeah, and you're expected to do it for, you know, what I would consider in our industry a pretty low fee. I mean, especially if it's a public, you know, I do actually do lighting. I have several projects last few years with the SCA, with School Construction Authority on public schools. And, you know, they are expecting a lot of time. And, you know, they are really negotiating with the prime designer for everybody else's fees. And so sometimes on projects that, I don't know if this has happened to some of you other guys who have been involved with public school or public projects, sometimes I will go in on a proposal for a project like that as the lighting designer. And then once the team gets the project, the lighting designers cut off the project because the public agency will say, well, you guys need to get your fee down. We recommend you cut out the lighting designer, the landscape designer, and the graphic designer. And so there goes your chance to, you know, give kids or whoever, you know, really great, healthy lighting. So yeah, and they expect, you know, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. Oh. Kim.
I would just thank you. I would like to just add on to that too, because I also have had projects similar to that where you said that they get they are awarded the project and then we get cut from it. And then there's been quite a few times where they've come, the owner, the contractor, whoever it is, the developer has come back to us and said, this isn't working out the way we think it's supposed to be working out. You know, can you fix it?
Yeah.
And it ends up costing them more money than if they had just hired us in the first place, because we have to undo the bad and try and figure out how we can salvage it. So usually that only takes one time if they're smart, maybe 2 times, and then they know not to cut us out. But like you said, unfortunately, it's a lesson that sometimes people have to learn. So
Yeah, but I think that, you know, one of the answers in the survey about how can we make a change is, you know, for people in the lighting industry to stay or get involved in some of these agency review boards or these, you know, code writing with the IES, because they don't, the education's not there. They don't understand that they're actually, it's as JP said, it's value added really, but they don't really understand that. Maybe we should go to the third slide because we're getting kind of late here, but okay, so again, it's all kind of connected, but our survey showed most responses rated lighting designers, government agencies, and architects as having the most impact on improving light health equity. We can't really expect the consumer or the end user to be the ones who are kind of controlling that, because they have no idea. Why is the impact of the design community not being felt at the end user level as regards to equitable provision of quality, healthful lighting? So everybody thinks that we have the most impact. Why are we not having very much impact? That's kind of a tough question, but is it the money? I don't know. JP.
So my take on this is that this is what I did a talk at the IES conference around this and how to get, I think lighting designers are put behind the 8 ball on this. They're brought into a project when a budget's probably already been set by a cost estimator. I'm thinking about a hospital project where they'll tell the LD right at the start, lighting can't cost more than $7 a square foot.
Right.
So right off the bat, you're constrained by not only energy code and not only whatever other constraints are being put on you, but $7 a square foot, make it work, right, is what you're being handed. So right at the outset, lighting designers are being hamstrung on projects like that. And when you talk about, we're bringing this back to the idea of equity, folks that are designing senior living facilities or public schools or any of the facilities where the general public are going to be using them, they're largely constrained right off the bat by budget. Now, what will increase the lighting budget, I think, goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is, we now have lighting controls on every SCA project because lighting controls are mandated by local law, right? That was an increased cost for sure, right? That raised the budget of lighting and controls because now you have to have energy controls. If we raised the standard for what is expected in, say, classroom lighting, it would definitely raise cost, but it would be considered a built-in cost of building a school in the future.
Right.
It wouldn't, so to me, it starts at the standards level. And then lighting designers can work within a much broader framework to make those standards reality.
What do you think manufacturers and so people on that side of the industry, right? Distributors, manufacturers, not so much contractors, but people actually, building the equipment and selling it through, unfortunately, 3 levels of markup. What I don't know if there's any manufacturers on our in our attendees here, but how can they impact things more? I don't know.
Well, I was going to say with the last question, but you mentioned how color temperature was so closely related to the public perception of healthy and good lighting. That is completely a product of the marketing budgets of major lighting companies, right? Because it's super sexy to show a light bulb changing color or to show lighting fixtures tunable, right? It becomes a feature set that they want to advertise, so it captures the public imagination. So it has nothing to do with creating healthy lighting. We know that by and large, right? But the perception's there because the marketing budget went there. So the first impact we can make is supporting design. I mean, I sell lighting fixtures for a living, but the first impact that we can make is supporting designers and not promoting feature sets that no one's not truly related on a scientific level to health or well-being.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting point because I'm old enough to remember the last big energy crisis, and when fluorescent lighting became triphosphor, and all of a sudden you had more than, used to be you had deluxe cool white and deluxe warm white. Those were your options. And they were pretty far from what we now would think of as full spectrum lighting. And the manufacturers in the lighting industry just jumped all over this triphosphor thing, which was it was much better lighting. But there suddenly popped up a lot of companies that were, I mean, I don't want to point fingers at specific manufacturers, but, Vitalite was one, right? Like the marketing behind these expensive fluorescents was exactly that. Like, this is your health will be really impacted by this, which was completely not true. They just were putting a lot of pink in it and it made people look healthy. I guess that made them feel better, but, I think it's an interesting point that you're bringing up, which is, I guess resisting that. I mean, and again, that is something designers can do, which is that we can educate our clients as to what is a valuable design decision in terms of both, money and in terms of good lighting. Because I'm sure we've all had clients who say, oh, I really, I don't want to buy these, either I want all of this to be LED, I want this to be LED, and I want to have color changing. I want to have, every hour of the day, I want controls to change the color of my lighting. And, I think you have to advise your clients about whether that's valuable or worth it for your application, for your user group, as some other folks have said. It's a really good point. That is something we could do and we can do. Jason.
Hi. I just want to say, as far as what manufacturers can do, I feel like is basically what the design community leads them to. Right. So manufacturers follow the market. I mean, they have thousands of people that do marketing and sales nationally and they're constantly getting information back about what people are looking for from those teams. So I would challenge, I'm not a designer anymore, I used to be, but I challenge the design community to move the needle on people valuing quality lighting. We're not seeing much quality lighting these days because people don't value it. So then how can we get to the point where, who can lead that? Who can inspire everyone in the country to care about this? And I think that's the design community more than anybody else. So, thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think as I was just saying, I think it is a component, but unfortunately, there are so many projects where, as people have said, where lighting designers aren't even hired. You got to find other ways to get people to understand how to get good quality lighting. Elaine.
And I think, because across the country, getting lighting is very different than what it is in New York City.
Yes,
when
true.
We have designs go through by all of these lighting designers, most of them, if they're spec'd in the city, actually get put through as your first name spec. But outside of the lighting, or outside of New York, those projects then get kind of ripped apart through the bidding system, and they all have to fall under one sales rep's line card. And so how do we how do we spec lock different attributes of light equality in our specifications? How do we as designers make sure that the projects that leave New York and go to other places have specification locks that make sure that whoever that sales rep is or whoever that contractor is has to focus on that
Yeah,
aspect.
I mean, it's the whole, submittal process and all. The longer you can stay in the process and control your spec, if it's an out-of-town spec and if you stipulated that you're going to review all the shop drawings and all the submittals, and it will be on the contractor or on the developer to prove that their substitution matches. It's totally on them that no one, they have to provide photometrics, they have to provide samples, all of that, and just try, I feel like that's kind of that's our only tool in holding on to the, as you say, spec lock.
And I think it's making use of your sales reps in the city. As a sales rep, the projects that I do out of New York, I build those relationships with other sales reps so that when your projects do go out of state or outside of New York, I can make sure that those designs actually get carried through, or try and use some type of networking so that I can talk to that sales rep and make them understand why that decision was made and why you have to keep that aspect of price or budget or whatever it is within your project. So I think making use of your sales rep in New York City is also a power that's not being as harnessed as it should be. So yeah, that's another one.
Right, great. I think we're kind of at the end of our time here, unless someone has an urgent comment they want to make. I think that's the end of our discussion. It's been great. I hope that, this is just a little beginning of something. I hope that we can really keep pursuing this and talking about it. So I am going to hand this back off to, I think, Amanda. And thank you all for your comments and your discussion. It's been really great. Good to hear everybody's opinions on this, thoughts on it. Thanks.
Yes, very much so. And I want to start by thanking our speakers this evening, Kim and Allison and Melanie. Thank you so much for leading all of that information. Thanks to everyone who came to have this discussion. I personally this is something I care a lot about, and I'm glad it's starting to get more and more thought put toward it. We want to thank the Delansky Group for the use of their Zoom account for this event. We also want to remind everybody about our next W.I.L.D event, the Bowl for Hope, which is taking place on October 11th. You can find out more information about that at W.I.L.D's website, their Facebook page, or Instagram account. And future events will be listed there as well. And then to introduce another event around this topic to get into further discussion, we will leave you with a video.
Hello, my name is Edward Bartholomew, and I am the principal of Bartholomew Lighting, as well as the co-founder of lightjustice.org. And I'm here to tell you about an exciting event that's coming up. It's called the IES Virtual Symposium, Light Plus Justice. Now, this symposium will take place on November 4th, Friday, from 11 to 5 p.m., and it will explore the intersection of lighting in the public realm with environmental justice and social equity. Now, its primary objective is really to look at how lighting can impact society and how society impacts lighting. And also to look at our collective awareness of infrastructural discrimination and the opportunities to deliver equitable and sustainable lighting revitalization to underserved and vulnerable communities that need it the most. Now, this will be 3 90-minute moderated panel discussions. Opening remarks will be by IES President Frank Graz, and closing remarks will be with Nancy Clanton. Session number 1 will look at light and justice from lantern laws to omnipresence, which gives us a historical perspective of looking at the power of lighting and how it has been used in society. The second part will be opportunities and barriers, both looking at light justice in the public realm and how ideas around policy and research and how all of those things impact how lighting is used both in a positive and also in a negative way. And lastly, just lighting in practice. It'll actually have case studies of community engaged lighting projects, and we'll have those designers and community activists talking about how they were able to utilize lighting to improve these communities through direct community engagement. So we hope that you will join us for this exciting symposium. This will be one of those rare opportunities where we'll have both academics, policymakers, lighting designers, all of them coming together to discuss lighting at a higher level, looking at its impact on communities and society in general. So we know it's going to be an exciting and engaging conversation, and we invite you to participate as the audience within this conversation. So we look forward to having you there. Again, November 4th from 11 to 5 p.m. Take care. Hello.
Thank you all again. And we will talk to you at our next event.
Actually, I think Allison has one thing to say. I'm
Oh,
sorry before we
please.
apologize.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have one more event as well. If you're familiar with the Let's Talk About Light and Health that the LHRC has been doing a monthly topic on. So we have one with Dr. Horowitz. So she's a professor and founding director of Mount Sinai's Institute for Health Equity Research. So she will be talking with us about this topic as well, and kind of on more the clinical side of it. So we can register at lightandhealth.eventbrite.com if you want to participate in that. But again, thank you everybody for participating tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.